Hello, I'm Super Orange Cat here today with a supplemental video. Today, I'm going to be covering over very important details that occur in the Made in Abyss movie, Dawn of the Deep Soul. The reason I'm making this movie is because Toonami is airing the start of Season 2 of Made in Abyss this upcoming Saturday night at 12:30 a.m. And you might be wondering, why would you be talking about a movie? Aren't movies and anime typically non-canon? Well, normally yes, but Dawn of the Deep Soul is an exception. It's basically the overall plot. You can sum it up as Riko, and Naaaanaachi travel through the fifth layer. Of course, a lot happens during it, especially when it comes to Brunweld's, probably Bondwield's, some weird Scandinavian names, compound, where all heck breaks loose. Now, ultimately, what I'm going to be covering is not necessarily going through the plot of that, and this is, again, a supplemental video, so ideally you watch that movie, and then you come to this video where I'll highlight some of the key points of Made in Abyss, Dawn of the Deep Soul that will probably be necessary to understand the place that we start off at Season 2. Now, I'm going to start off with what is going to be a very massive change. That is, if you're paying attention, you might notice that there is something new around Riko's neck. Yes, she has a white whistle. Kinda. It's not formally a white whistle in the way that her mother Liza has it, or Ozen, or Braunweld has, because the white whistle is conceptually supposed to be made out of something that was important, or something that tied the person wearing it to their humanity. They have to sacrifice, in short, they have to sacrifice a bit of their humanity in a way to get it. Hence, arguably, why all the white whistles we encountered so far are a bit, at the very least, a bit unhinged. Brunweld, for very obvious reasons, if you watch the movie. Liza, if you pay attention to the first season, Liza had a very wonky, very out there, very eccentric personality. And Ozen for, yeah, being Ozen. If you watched the first season, you know damn well why, you know. But hell, Ozen's top girl in my opinion so far, but you have to sacrifice something. And Riko indirectly did. She lost a friend, and a friend that she makes in this movie, which is the girl you're seeing here. Her name is PRUSHKA, which does come from the Russian for dawn. And she was raised as the daughter of Brunweld. However, Brunweld is not a good father. Not at all. As much as he really, and this is the right way to use this term, gaslights her into thinking he's a good father by simply hiding his ugly deeds from her. And the reason why. Okay, I mentioned, you probably know from the end of the first season, that Brunweld, along with some of his minions, basically took a bunch of orphans from the surface of Earth and basically experimented them on deep in the abyss. And Prushka was no exception. However, a bit like Naaaanaachi, she survived the torture, and because of that, at this point, she lost her sense of self due to the strains of ascending, so she didn't know who she was, she didn't know who humanity was, so Brunweld raised her effectively to be his own daughter. So you think, oh, it's some weird, creepy, but somewhat bittersweet ending to her story. Well, if he raised her to be a loving daughter, yes. He raised her to be an energy source. As it gets described here, they use suitcases. They fill suitcases with the emotion centers of these orphans to use as energy to counter the strains of ascending. As you see multiple times, the minions of Brunweld go up a layer. Like you see them at the very beginning of this movie, a layer higher than they normally are, to exterminate a bunch of parasitic wasps in a flower field. And you realize that they have this power for this very dark reason. And it kind of goes into Naaaanaachi, where if you know the end of the first season, Naaaanaachi mentions, yeah, after the whole I got turned into a rabbit thing, I worked with Brunweld, but he never exactly stated what he did to work with Brunweld before escaping with Mitty. Well, to make it put it lightly, he was basically the equivalent of a concentration camp clown. Naaaanaachi would be with the kids, so they would be trigger their emotional centers to be happier and happier and generate this energy by, like, petting with him, being with the cute little bunny wabbit, stuff like that. While Naaaanaaaachi knew damn full well what was going to happen to these kids, which, I mean, Made in Abyss does an amazing job of taking a situation that's like, oh, sad, dark, and then they just crank up the fucky wucky up to an 11. And I love the show for that. And it's something I caught me by surprise of like the whole. I thought Naaaanaachi was like basically going to do basic paperwork or something. Like he was basically treated as some bottom rung employee by Brunwald. But no, he was played a disturbingly important part in Brunwald's plan. And he does the same. Ultimately, in the end, Brunwald sacrifices his quote unquote daughter PRUSHKA and even states that she was his strongest energy source yet because her love was personal to him, even through him betraying her. Because, again, with her sense of self being only built like months earlier, she didn't understand the concept of human betrayal. Where a normal person would be like, that guy's shifty, anyone can betray you if they have the incentive to. She never saw the world right way. She was as innocent can be. And that really shone through her interactions with our main trio, especially being very fast and close and personal friends with Riko, which really helps Riko's character too, because she, for the first time, has directly seen and lost something. Where you say Naaaanaachi lost Mitty multiple times. First, her being turned into an ugly, pained monster, and second, having Reg blow her up to put her out of her misery. And then also, you can argue that Reg multiple times almost lost Riko, including the scene where she gets stabbed by the orc piercer, and he almost accidentally kills her multiple times trying to stop that before Naaaanaachi saves her. But Riko feels this personal torment, and this personal torment through PRUSHKA was allowed her to generate this white whistle. And the reason why this white whistle is very important now is because you can only go to the sixth layer by blowing the white whistle, and like the portal sphere thing will come up, and you can go in, and then you can go down into the next layer, which symbolizes the eliteness of that layer, where only white whistles or people that the white whistle directly wants with them can go down there. And we do get a taste already of the creatures that are in the sixth layer. And a creature I think will play some role in the next season are, I forgot the name, there's these green parasitic wasp things. How their action is basically a direct comparison. Like, it's basically like, what if you put together a wasp and a face hugger from the Alien franchise, basically. So they're gonna have to. They already dealt with it there and survived. And since it was already mentioned by the minion, like, oh, these are usually in the sixth layer, we have no idea how they got up here. That implies that they are going to be dealing with them again some point, probably in season 2, probably pretty early on in it. So that's somewhat important. The big important thing to first point out, again, like I mentioned, was Riko has a white whistle, and it's shaped very vaguely like a human heart. So not like a whistle like Bronweld or Ozen or Liza have. It's a bit different. And that shows a bit to the unique circumstances of of Riko as a character, that she's not truly experienced, but she has like the heart of someone who's a white whistle. As from the very first season, she basically came in saying, I want to be a white whistle like my mother. I want to be just like my mother. And in this step way, through the determination of her heart, using her heart, she is now one step closer to actualizing her goal of being like her mother. Other important things. I already mentioned the reveal of Naaaanaachi, what he did, what his role of Brunwald was. Another really big one I want to point out, which will definitely affect the power dynamic of this next season, is the reveal of what exactly causes Reg to have his incinerator powers. You might notice from the first season a couple times when Reg puts on his helmet, a little like symbol pops up in like the monitor in the little screen. Naaaanaachi sees this in this movie and says, I recognize what that is. That's a number system. So all these markings on his helmet are numbers, and he deduced that's probably the amount of incinerator blasts you have until you basically become just a bunch of junk, until you're basically worthless, you self and hero, as it were. And at the start of the movie, Naaaanaaaachi reasoned Reg probably only had 3 left. However, one scene later on this movie, Reg taps into a power source to charge himself, and at the end of this movie and going into season 2, Naaaanaaaachi deduces that Reg probably has about 10 now left. So again, that adds a bit of a ticking clock feature where you're going to be facing darker, scarier beasts the further lower you go down. You're probably going to have to use Incinerator, and there's now a ticking clock to how often you can use it. More than just simply knowing that Reg will have to be out of commission for 2 hours after using it. It's now he only has a certain number of uses, period. Where in the first season, we were kind of led to believe that it's theoretically an infinite power source of Reg. That is not the case. And again, it's implied also that the electrical charges for Reg also impact his memory. As you might remember, first season, Riko electrocutes Reg to wake them up, and that led to his memory difficulty about where he exactly came from. Although we do see a bit of flashbacks in the first season that implied that he at the least knew who Liza was. And also in this movie, when he charges himself up, he basically doesn't know who the hell he is. He just turns into what can be best described as a force of pure destruction. And he just completely started destroying the compound left and right, fortunately sparing both Naaaanaaaachi and Riko. So again, that's a little bit of lore about Reg that got added in. And also, again, I already mentioned Riko's white whistle. Reg's power supply is finite. We now know what Naaaanaachi's role was in this whole Brunwald campaign, and also the fact that Brunwald is no longer going to really be a threat. At the end of the movie, long story short, because of an artifact, he kind of can't die. But at the end, he just kind of sees them off like, well, Naaaanaachi, you've bested me. Maybe you do have a chance making it further. Best luck to you all. And this is the same guy that brutalized a bunch of kids, Dr. Mengele style, by the way. Like, this guy is nowhere near sane. I mean, even like back in like season 1 when Ozen was talking to Riko, when she said, okay, fine, I'll let you go down further. She's like, okay, I have to tell you about these white whistles that are down there. They're all crazy. And she referred to Brunwald specifically as, oh, he's such a scoundrel. And notably, there's 2 other white whistles she mentioned, and she used even darker terminology for them. So, again, it's kind of like 1 down, 2 to go. They're probably going to face both these white whistles in some capacity in this upcoming season, so stay tuned for that. So, again, you have Brunwald is still around, but will probably not play a real threat. They might not really go into the whole child experimentation thing anymore, because that seemed to be more of a Brunwald thing. The other 2 white whistles don't seem to be implicated in on it. We have Riko has a white whistle. Riko has a white whistle because of PRUSHKA. PRUSHKA will probably just be mentioned a few times of, well, she's kind of like a 4th member now. They'll probably symbolize to the whistle as this is PRUSHKA, because this was the last bit of remains of her that they find. And outside of that, those are the biggest details. And the reason why I say this supplemental video, because I probably didn't mention everything that's important. There's probably many more details, little details I didn't mention here that might get referred to in the upcoming season. So again, one more time, I'm going to briefly sum up everything. Riko has a white whistle because of a girl named PRUSHKA. Brunwald, the white whistle that we see at the end of season 1, is still around, but probably not going to play much of a role. Reg has a finite power source. And also, there's parasitic wasp things that we know are from the 6th layer that we're probably going to have to see at some point. So if they see them, they're like, oh no, these are the parasitic wasps again. And if you didn't see Dawn of the Deep, so you'll be like, again? So not as big as something like, the whole concept of PRUSHKA or Reg having a finite power source. What do you guys think? If there's any other things I'm forgetting, leave them in the comments below. Help a brother out here. I'm Super Orange Cat, and that is all.